to the cloud. Hi, I'm Dr. Sara Little. Today is Thursday, July 16th, and I had said that today's topic would be stages of change. There is a psychological model for how people successfully change that was developed back in the 1990s, which I guess is a very long time ago now, but I remember it like it was yesterday. So what does that say about me? And I'm, a few weeks ago, Manya had sent out a questionnaire asking people what they wanted me to talk about. And there were many very, very good suggestions and ideas. And a lot of them were very specific about how to deal with this, how to deal with that situation. And what I've decided to do is do my talks about more general psychological principles and leave it open for questions so that you can ask about your own individual situations and how it applies to this. But I thought, you know, people had questions about how do you handle triggers, how do you handle, you know, dealing with family, dealing with kids, dealing with spouses, marriage, things like that. And they all can really apply to the various topics. Last time it was about triggers. This time it'll be about stages of change in terms of how do you change yourself. For example, if you are having trouble with your kids and you're deciding that you're just not, it would help if you could be more patient. How do you become more patient? And it's a nice thing to say, and we study that as far as advice for how to be, but it's easier said than done. So the stages of change model is a really good one to help people actually create change. And I'll give you a little background about this. In the late 1980s, early 1990s, in Rhode Island, as you guys know, I come from Rhode Island and I got my doctorate at the University of Rhode Island. At that time, there was a professor there, Jim Prochaska, and his colleague, Dr. Norcross, who were given a grant, I believe it was from Johnson & Johnson, to help people quit smoking. Back in those days, it was still a fairly new thing. It still is an issue, but at that time, it was a very hot topic. They got hundreds and thousands of dollars to figure out how to help people stop smoking, because people would make New Year's promises and try to stop smoking, and then they couldn't do it. So
losing weight, a whole bunch of stuff.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, eventually they applied these principles to other things, but what they did for this first research was send, us willing graduate students. Actually, I wasn't one of the grad students at that time, but they sent out graduate students to study people who were trying to quit smoking, give them questionnaires, ask questions, look at who succeeded and who didn't. And they were able to tell what separated the group of people who were eventually able to succeed from the group of people who never did. They tried and tried, but they never managed it. And what they came up with was a series of stages that people who were successful at changing went through these stages. And these are pretty clear stages. A while back, I had talked about the stages of grief. The stages of grief are a little bit more vague in that you can go back and forth between stages. They're not absolutely 1, 2, 3. The stages of change are much more stepwise. You have to do step 1 before you can do step 2 effectively. If you try to skip a step, it doesn't work very well. They came up with these steps, and which they called stages, and they could see that this really made the difference between people who were successful at changing and people who were not. And then they were able to come up with ways that you could actually use that information to help people change and to help yourself change. Now you might be thinking, I'm talking a lot about helping oneself change, but what about helping someone else change, like say helping my kid to stop being so blah, 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 fill in the blank, helping my husband or my wife or my mother or my father, my boss. getting someone else to change. There actually is some information on that. I'll touch on that. So I guess let me go to it. Any questions before I actually start? Nope. Okay. I will share the screen. And
Okay, I do have a question. The study was done about smoking, but can you apply it to any kind of a thing, right?
Very good question. You're right. I was going to say something and I forgot, so thank you. Yes, the first initial study was done about smoking. After that, they applied it to all sorts of things. And if you look up literature searches on stages of change, you will see it's applied to diet, to exercise, to all kinds of, to alcohol, certainly, to all kinds of behaviors, and to criminals, to losing your temper, that sort of thing, and even to doing health promoting behaviors such as mammograms. Somebody did their dissertation research on getting women to change their avoidance behavior because a lot of women avoid getting mammograms, and they use the stages of change model for that. So yeah, good question. It seems to apply to everything. All right, are you able to see this slideshow that I have here?
Excellent.
Okay, let me see.
I do not understand. Usually I go to Google. What exactly is the word contemplation? The understanding of the word. Usually I look at Google and see what it means.
Okay. Contemplation means when you think about it. You're not doing something yet, but you're thinking. חושבים. חושבים על זה. Yeah, you're thinking.
נראה לי זה יותר מהרהרים, לא?
מהרהרים?
Yeah.
Okay, מהרהרים. The good word.
Right. So pre-contemplation is before you're even thinking about it. I mean, you're only kind of thinking about it. And here, let me see if I can pull this up. Are you able to see this? This I changed to another page. Can you see that? And
I'm still seeing the stage of changes, how successful people change.
You're still seeing the slideshow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let me see if I can.
Sarah, the pre-contemplation is something to do with our subconscious, or it's not?
Well, let me go a little further with that and we'll see whether this is what you're thinking.
Okay. I'm muting myself because I'm eating and drinking. I don't want to do background noises.
All right. Actually, let me go back then to the slideshow. Where's my slide?
For a moment, it ran away. It vanished.
Okay, I lost
I don't know why. Also, it's set to go back to the beginning. Okay.
Okay, but we're back to the slideshow.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I was trying to say is that I sent you last night some things you could print out that have more explanation of these things. But I'll tell you about pre-contemplation. It's when, for example, as a therapist, let's say, somebody comes into my office and I say, hi, what can I do for you? And they say, I'm here because my wife sent me. I'm here because my husband sent me. I'm here because my parents sent me. I'm here because my boss sent me. Or somebody is, or I'm here because the judge sentenced me to court for drinking and driving. They don't really think they need to change. It's more about, how can I get my wife to stop nagging me? It's all her fault or his fault. And basically, people in that situation resist change. Or it could be somebody who really wanted to change and tried and tried and tried, and it just hasn't worked. Like somebody who has tried to stop smoking, somebody who has tried to change their eating habits, somebody who's tried to resist carbs or sweets. And they've tried, you probably know many people who have tried to change their diet and they feel like it's hopeless, it can't be done, they're demoralized, or people who have tried to change their thinking. We've done talking about cognitive behavioral therapy, in which we look at how do you change the negative thinking. And at the simplest level, cognitive behavioral thinking simply asks you to look at and pay attention to and listen to what you're telling yourself. You know, tell yourself negative things about yourself, and then refute that, argue that, talk back to the part of your mind that's saying, oh, you can't do this, you're terrible. So in pre-contemplation, you're still in the negative space of it's hopeless, it can't be done, whether it's cheering yourself up, whether it's stopping eating certain things, whether it's stopping losing your temper. Last time we talked about triggers, of what triggers you to lose your temper. And say you've tried a few of the techniques that we talked about and you're feeling like, I tried, can't be done, you know, and so people in that stage are demoralized and discouraged. Any questions on that? Okay, so in the contemplation stage, that's the next stage, people will admit they have a problem. They recognize that there's a problem. Either they're not eating well. Let's say somebody with high blood pressure, they know they need to stop salt and fatty foods. Somebody with, with problems with their temper, or smoking or drinking, whatever it is. And they're beginning to acknowledge, yes, okay, I need to do something about it, but oh, it's going to take so much work to change my diet, to exercise, to be patient. I can't do it during coronavirus. I can't, you know, this obstacle, that obstacle. So people might plan to do it in the future. So they're beginning to recognize, yes, they have a problem, all right, but all kinds of excuses for why they can't do it right away. Now there's a value to the contemplation stage when you're thinking about it and you start to get stronger in your motivation. But if it keeps you stuck in, you know, thinking and thinking and thinking, but you don't actually do anything, that can be a problem in and of itself. Let me go back a moment because this didn't really explain much. In the pre-contemplation stage, so how do you deal with somebody in pre-contemplation? Say you are the spouse of somebody who is smoking, who loses their temper, who is drinking too much, who is not exercising. A couple of things. First of all, how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? Anybody know that joke? No.
I know, but Polish, how many Polish people need to change a light bulb?
No, it's not that kind of joke. No. How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb has to really want to change. Okay, so.
Oh, interesting.
Life
interesting.
Can change, and you can actually help them, but they have to really want to change. So how do you get someone to really want to change? At this stage, information is not going to do any good. You'll see later that information has its place later on. You can send them links to exercise, you know, to gyms. You can pay for their membership. You can take away their credit card so that they can't buy alcohol, whatever it is that you want them to do. But until they internally want to change, they are not going to take any of your advice. So save your breath on those kinds of things. On the other hand, what can help somebody at that point is recognizing that maybe they feel like it's hopeless, maybe they feel like it can't be done, maybe they're demoralized, maybe they don't really recognize the impact it can have on them. So at the pre-contemplation stage, an emotional appeal is what helps people. And you may have seen the ads, I don't I haven't seen them in years, but way back when hi Susanna, way back when smoking was a big issue and people were struggling with stopping smoking, one of the pieces of advice was to put a picture of your child on your cigarette pack, to slip it in between the plastic and the cigarette so that when you picked it up, you would see your child, and that would emotionally trigger you to remember that you need to stop smoking for your child's sake. So to help somebody who's in pre-contemplation, there are ways that you can help remind them emotionally of what they need. And often this jump from pre-contemplation to contemplation happens to people when they're like, they've reached so way down, say they've been drinking, and alcohol itself numbs you, so they don't really feel a lot emotionally. But then they get into a really bad car accident, or they get their driver's license revoked, or their spouse threatens divorce or divorces them. When they're really, really way down, then it finally hits and they're ready to change. So that will help change someone from pre-contemplation to contemplation. But that's about all you can do. And if you're thinking you can guilt trip somebody from pre-contemplation to contemplation, you have to be very careful about the difference between helping them to see the realistic consequences of what they're doing and the emotional consequences, and just using it as a guilt trip or as a threat. If you're going to threaten all kinds of things, with children, you threaten taking away privileges or something, or you threaten divorce with a spouse. If you're not going to follow up on it, don't bother. It's going to go nowhere. So let's assume somebody is in a contemplation state. Let's assume it's yourself, and you realize that you have the problem, and you realize you're stuck, and you realize you've been stuck for a while, so you want to act, but you don't know what to do. Getting through that from one to the other are focusing on the solution and thinking about the future. In behavioral terms, in cognitive behavioral terms, instead of beating yourself up for things you've done in the past, instead think positively about what you can do now, as if you were just starting right this moment, totally fresh, and you didn't have failures in the past and you didn't have struggles in the past. And you're able to think about ways that you can come up with ideas. It's a time for some creative ideas. Maybe I can try this, maybe I can try that, and start thinking more about the future and not beat yourself up about the past. And you can tell when you're getting to the end of contemplation, because you're starting to feel excitement, anticipation, you're starting to want to do something, you're starting to feel a little anxious because you're really going to do something, but it's exciting too. And if you are supporting someone else who is in the contemplation stage and getting ready to prepare, then it's important to help them and be excited with them and help them focus on the positive and focus on the future and on the options and possibilities. Any questions for this?
Yeah, I have a question. Maybe you will talk about it on the other slides, but how do you go from this stage when you feel the anxiety? How do you not stuck with it, and how it's not overwhelming you? Just the anxiety part, because all the excitement and the anticipation and the activity, I find myself a lot of times in this stage with a lot of stuff, and then the anxiety can just overwhelm you and you're stuck with it and you just give up. And it can be small things, not major changes.
Excellent question. And the answer to that is don't skip the preparation stage, because people skip that a lot. People go from contemplation when they're all excited to action when they think they're doing stuff, and they skip preparation. And if you skip preparation, you're going to fall flat on your face very often. So you really do need to spend time with as much as 1 month of preparation. And that's different than contemplation. It's not just thinking about it, but it's really, really planning.
Just plan it carefully.
Planning. Now, first you need to make a public statement, because there's a lot of research showing that people who announce what they're planning to do feel more obligated to do it. Another one is convincing yourself that taking action really is best, and you might make, and after we're done with this slideshow, I'll go to the pages that I sent you guys on WhatsApp that has some planning questions of what action will you do, what you do next. It's really important to look at what works for you. Let's say you decide that you really need to exercise for your health, for osteoporosis, for diet, for whatever, you need to exercise. So there are lots of ways to exercise. For some people, it works to join a gym. For other people, it's a waste of time. They pay their fee and they never go. For some people, it works to use YouTube videos. For other people, they don't like working out alone. For some people, it works to buy a treadmill. For other people, the treadmill becomes a clothes horse for hanging their pajamas. I'm sure you all know people for whom those things are true. Same thing for diet. There are probably a million different diet programs out there. And everybody, you'll find someone who endorses every single one. Oh, it worked for me, oh, it worked for me, or it didn't work for me. So you really need to take the time to think about yourself, what fits you, what fits your lifestyle, and that takes time. As you do that, you become more able to feel realistic, that maybe this can really work for me. And you think about areas where it will or won't work. Let's say it's changing your diet. So you think, yeah, I really have to cut out carbs or something like that. But realistically, you think, well, but my kids need to eat, my spouse needs to eat, so how am I going to do that? Do I cook 2 different meals? Do I, and as you think it through, you'll be able to come up with a solution, which is a lot better than if you simply say, okay, I'm joining Weight Watchers. So you join Weight Watchers, and then you go home and you go, oh, now what do I do about my kids' lunches? How do I pack those? So plan ahead. Preparation is really important. Leaving out this stage reduces success. In fact, it leaves you ready to fall on your face. Planning means a firm, detailed plan. It also gives you a time to research it, look on the internet, talk to people, and make sure that you know all of the change processes so that you understand what you're doing and where you're at. Any questions on that so far? Okay. Is that helpful? Does that sound like, and can I ask, the times when things haven't worked, did you do an intensive preparation stage?
I know that yesterday I talked to my husband about this exactly. I'm thinking about taking an online class, and there is millions out there and a lot of free resources, and you can watch on YouTube about anything and everything. And I told him that if I'm not taking a class that I need to pay, even if it's $10 a class, I don't know. I'm not taking something that commits me to go. If I'm going to a class outside with people, and it's fine. But if I need to do it by myself in front of the computer, I need something that really to be committed to it. And
Motivate
if I'm paying, I feel like I'm more committed to it, even if it's a small amount of money. It's not, it's not the issue, but I need to feel committed to this, and I need to pay for the class.
Excellent. That's really good thinking. Yeah. Somebody else was trying to say something? Or was that just background noise? Okay. Yeah, that is excellent. And knowing that about yourself, and also thinking about when, what time, how often, even down to the details of the technology, what's going to work for you, where will it work, things like that. Yes, excellent.
I'm going through this process right now.
All right.
So it's
that
right
will
on spot.
increase the chances of success. That's really important.
I will update you. I will let you know.
Thank you. Yes, not wasting time doing those things. That's really important. Yes.
So I wish I could pay somebody to motivate me with my problem.
Well, we'll keep going, and maybe you'll find ways to motivate yourself or work with.
I'm a hoarder.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
I'm a hoarder.
A
I have a
hoard-
hard time getting rid of stuff.
Okay. All right. So that's one of the.
I wish I could take a class and pay somebody, but
I bet
yeah.
if you Googled it, you could find things like that. And certainly that's something a therapist could help you with. I'm too much of your friend to be able to be the therapist, but there are therapists who can do that, and it would be worth it, especially if insurance will pay for parts of that. So the action stage is what most of us think about when we think about changing. You know, that's the stage that you hear about, and that's the stage that people often just jump into. But jumping into, I think I've convinced you by now, I hope I've convinced you by now that jumping into it without all of this preparation is not likely to succeed, and in fact is likely to boomerang, because then you're going to end up feeling demoralized and feel like, oh, I can't change. It's not going to work. So action is pretty obvious. And a caveat with action, something to watch out for, is not planning on how to maintain changes. Because in the initial stages, you're very enthusiastic, you've paid for your class, you've paid for your therapist, you bought the outfit, you're ready to go. But how are you going to do this over time? And so in addition to changing your behavior, you have to change your self-image, your thinking. So you need to address each of those things. So in terms of what you want to change, you might put down that I want to change exercising. I want to be able to exercise more. But realize that you need, if you're going to have a page for changing your exercise, you will want a page for changing your self-image. That I want to change my self-image as somebody who is lazy to somebody who likes exercise. Well, how am I going to do that? That goes, you go back through the whole thing, pre-contemplation. Why would I need to do this? Well, the reason is that there's a lot of research that shows that your self-image has a lot to do with how easy or hard it is to change and what you believe about yourself. A very common example, and you probably know people who look wonderful now as adults. They look great. They're just beautiful. Their body is slim and they are in good shape and all that. And yet, as you get to know them, you find out that when they look in the mirror, what they actually see is their 15-year-old chubby, freckled, pimpled, braces self. Okay, because their self-image has never changed. And so they're still acting from that self-image. So we need to change our self-image along with changing the actual behavior. We need to change the emotions as far as how we feel about ourselves, what we appreciate, what we don't appreciate, and our thinking. I talked about cognitive schemas in terms of what you can, how you think the world works. And I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but just understanding that it's not just about the behavior. It's about seeing yourself as an active person if it's exercise, as a non-smoker if it's smoking. And you probably know people who were able to stop smoking overnight or stop drinking overnight or stop something overnight or do something overnight. And when you talk to those people, you find that what they were able to do was, in their mind, just completely change their self-image, change their cognitive schema, and be able to see themselves as a non-smoker, a non-drinker. And when you think about that about yourself, all of the things about yourself that you take for granted, let's assume that you take for granted that you're, well, let me think of I guess everybody here is college educated. So you take for granted that or you take for granted that you can read. Let's say you take it for granted, and that's an assumption that's at the back of your mind. Imagine being somebody who had a lot of trouble reading, who was dyslexic, and who, maybe back to Manya's example actually of last week or yesterday, when she talked about having a lot of trouble reading and seeing herself as someone who was not very smart. And it was because of a vision problem. And what she needed was someone to help her just pretty much overnight switch that self-concept and realize that she is smart. This was just a vision problem, but her brain works very well and she is smart. So the same sort of thing, to be able to change your image of yourself overnight or very quickly and absorb that you like exercise, you like eating healthy, you like looking the way you do or looking the way you will look, and accepting that that's how you are. Any questions about that?
So Sarah, for me, I am like listening to you talking, and something that I think you are gonna probably touch base later in your classes about self-esteem.
Yes.
But I am putting myself into this situation that, for example, I've been a stay-at-home mom for a while, and I've been wanting to go back to what I was before, like go back to work and, you know, be more independent of my husband financially, things like that. And I think I really need to work in my self-esteem, because I keep thinking, oh my gosh, how am I gonna go to the market? How am I gonna compete with all these students that are super technological and I am not? You know, I keep like putting myself down. And
that's a great example of a behavior to change. So
exactly.
It sounds like actually there are two behaviors or two things, and you can do them at the same time. One is actually doing things to get yourself technically prepared, you know, writing up a resume, looking at jobs and starting, you know, there at the contemplation, you know, maybe pre-contemplation of thinking about it and contemplation of starting to think about how you would go about it. And it sounds like as part of your pre-contemplation, you're recognizing that some of the preparation you need to do is planning for your self-esteem. And so self-esteem would be a separate one, improving your self-esteem as a behavior. It's an internal behavior. It's a behavior of something that you do to yourself, but it's still considered a behavior. And there are things to do about it. I won't go into all of it now, but yes.
Okay.
But I'll also say that they feed off each other. If you're able to start doing things and feel, there's something called self-esteem and there's something called self-efficacy. Self-esteem has to do with just the internal feeling of whether you're worthwhile, no matter what you do. Self-efficacy has to do with recognizing that you have accomplishments and that you can make a difference and that you do accomplish things. And as you build up your self-efficacy, which you can build up by carefully doing things that you little by little can do more of, instead of overwhelming yourself and trying to jump in. Because if you keep jumping in over your head, you're going to you're drowning, and it's going to feel like
overwhelming.
It overwhelms everything. You don't get self-efficacy and you don't get self-esteem. If you are able to take it little by little, you start building up self-efficacy, which does help self-esteem.
Just self-esteem. Okay.
So that's a short answer, but yes, we will go into that.
Okay, perfect.
Then the next stage, so let's say you've chosen your program You've decided it's a certain exercise program, a certain diet program, a certain way to help yourself stay calm when your kids push your buttons. Whatever it is you're going to do, and you've thought about ways to do it, you've gotten some support, network support, you've talked with your spouse or your friends and learned breathing techniques and whatever else you needed to do to get ready to act on it. So then you do it, and the maintenance stage is when you're actually doing it and you've been doing it for 6 months to a lifetime. Now that means during the action stage, you're going to hit bumps, you're going to hit points at which something's not working and you revise it. You know, it's a work in progress. But when you get to where something seems to be working and you are actually exercising 5 days a week, every week for about 6 months, or have a new set of eating habits and it comes easily and naturally and your family has stopped complaining, and you know, whatever it is, then you need to make sure that you're ready for relapse prevention, that you have ways to stay motivated, that you stay away from triggers and temptations. And I won't go into all of that now, but it's the kinds of things that you can think through with a good friend or a spouse or somebody about, you know, okay, a party's coming up, what do I do? They're going to be eating lots of cake, how do I avoid that? Or I caught a cold this week, I don't feel like exercising, but that's going to set me back, what am I going to do about that? So finding ways to deal with, or coronavirus showed up and now I can't go to the gym, you know, now what do I do? So ways to deal with those kinds of things. And it does take, you know, somewhere probably as long as 6 months. There, research says it's something like 3 months, 21 days, 3 months, 21 weeks. There are different numbers depending on what your source is for how long it takes to establish a new habit and routine. And that goes back to what we've talked about with the neural pathways in your brain of how our brains work habitually and tend to go back to the same pathways that they're used to. And it takes a while to establish a new pathway, especially if you have been you know, lazy or eating improperly or whatever it was for a long, long while. So it will take a while. Then the ultimate goal is get to a point where it's easy. And some of you may know people who just internally are so motivated to exercise that they can't not do it for one day, or that they are so committed to a certain way of eating that they don't like unhealthy eating anymore, and that they're not afraid of relapse. It is kind of controversial. Now, the Stages of Change model came out, the seminal book came out in 1994. It was Changing for Good. And at that time, there was that question of, you know, do we reach termination? Is relapse simply part of life? How do you maintain it? And in all the years since then, it does seem that relapse does happen. It's a pretty common part of the human condition. And so that's part of what we have to plan for. And only about 20% of people actually really change on their first try, even with all that planning. So if you find yourself relapsing, the most important thing they have found, and this was based on the research, what they found is don't spend time beating yourself up. If you beat yourself up, that just slows you down. Dust yourself off, pick yourself up, and go back to whatever earlier stage you needed. Don't wallow in your self-blame. And again, use the resources that helped you in the first place at the contemplation stage, whether it's support from other people, whether it's going back to being a beginner at something. that's okay. At the end of time, the more, even if you go back, 100 times, you will have ended up spending more of your life doing what you really wanted to do than if you spent a lot of it beating yourself up and then not going back and trying again. Okay, so that's the model. Let me go to the worksheet. Actually, there are two different worksheets. Okay. Here it is. Let me see. I'll stop that one and I will share this one. Okay, this is one that I sent along to everyone. It explains the stages, the pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, the action stage, the maintenance stage, the termination stage where, okay, I'm doing it. I don't need to worry about it anymore. But there's also, whoops, I slipped back. So the relapse stage. And it's really more, can you guys see this picture?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really more like you go up there, go through the spiral, get there, and then, ever play Candyland or Chutes and Ladders? Okay, so it's like that. But very often, the second time around, third time around, if you learn from your mistakes, you can go through the stages faster and stay at the maintenance stage. So that's the goal. Let me stop that and go to the, let's see, is it this one? Yeah, okay. Let me share this. Yes. This one. And again, this is one of the ones that I sent on the WhatsApp. This is something where you can look at it yourself. And again, choose a very specific behavior, and you may want to do a few of these because one would have to do with the behavior, like for example, applying for jobs, actually gearing up and being ready and sending that job, looking for a job, a real serious job search. But then there might be another one saying improving my self-esteem or self-efficacy, something like that. So here's the behavior, here's the goal. And it's important to put the goal in positive terms, not only negative, not, stop being so impatient, but the goal would be to be able to be patient, to be able to, and the more specific you can get, the better, to be able to take a breath and smile and say, respond to my child in a calm way, no matter what they do. Something like that. I'm still working on that. And my kids are adults. So yeah, here's the goals. And this, interestingly, this goal is eating only one candy bar per week. So that's realistic. Saying cutting out all candy bars may not be realistic. For you, it might be realistic to say only one bar. On the other hand, in your preparation stage, you may realize that sugar is a real trigger for you, and that just metabolically, one candy bar is enough to send you down the road to hyperglycemia, and you don't stop. It may be like alcohol for some people. So you may need to cut them all out. It's really individual and based on you. Then you determine where you're at. Are you at pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, or maintenance? And then you're thinking about what strategies. If you're in the pre-contemplation stage, think about what are the pluses and minuses of what you're doing. and it's a lot of work to change your diet. It's a lot of trouble. It's a lot of inconvenience. Your family won't want to go along with it maybe. And then think of the ways in which it might affect you now in your future if you do or don't change. Not changing right now might not make a difference. In the future, you might gain weight, you might be unhealthy, whatever the issues are. And then looking at what leads you to resist change, denying consequences, rationalizing, really be honest with yourself. And I think at one point I sent, maybe I didn't, I can send you guys a worksheet on cognitive distortions, the ways we all basically lie to ourselves and tell ourselves that it's okay when it really isn't. Get social support, get support from people, get them to tell you what your defense mechanisms are. Get community support, workshops, classes, exercise, diet programs, parenting. So these are all at the pre-contemplation level. So to answer the question of this is my stage, what do I do about it? These are very specific suggestions. And I won't go through all of them now because it's almost 1:30, but it goes on. It goes on to preparation and action. Whoops, somebody was writing, I should probably change that. And maintenance, termination. Okay. Again, that's one that was sent. You can have it, you'll have it in your WhatsApp as an attachment.
Great.
Questions, comments, anything?
No, this is great. We can apply for so many things in our lives. I mean,
Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
That's
It's amazing how it's so related to a conversation I had yesterday, and it really maybe it will help me to decide and to plan properly what I want to do in this next year.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping. As I said, if you missed what I said at the beginning, that the great feedback that Manya and I got from everybody who filled out the questionnaires had some very specific things that were very important. And so I thought that the best way for me to address that is to talk about some more general principles that everybody can apply to the situation. So this is one. Last time it was triggers, because the trigger will be different for different people, but it still will address issues with your family, with your career, or whatever. And this time it also is about issues that each person can address individually.
yeah.
Absolutely.
You are teaching us how to fight our weaknesses. It is I'm going to study the thing all over again. I'm contemplating.
Yeah, exactly. I would like to, and that's what I see my role as a psychologist with my patients as well. There's a lot of information out there on the internet and YouTubes and everywhere else, self-help books that will help a lot of people. But to figure out what applies to you, sometimes you need somebody.
You really inspired me.
Oh,
this I wouldn't say it's a class. This meeting has been inspiring.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, I read so many books, so many articles.
Okay.
But, I needed somebody to just push me the right direction.
And to help a person figure out where to start. I mean, this might do, but I guess I will also say that if it does feel overwhelming and you don't know where to start, that's what a good therapist can do. They will listen to you and hear you of all the confusion and everything, but they shouldn't stop there. I mean, it's nice and it's very helpful when I listen to people, and that's all very good. And for some people, maybe that's enough. Maybe that will help them figure out what they need to do next. But for most people, I find what I can do is, you know, I've studied this stuff for 30 years, and I can help point them in the direction of what fits their needs. And the actual teaching them of what they need to do, because I see it as more of an education. The actual teaching, I can do some, but I can also send them, I mean, every week I send my patients resources and links and things like that that apply. But the difference between me doing it and them doing it on their own is I can pick the ones that I think will fit them and that match them. You know, doing it on your own, you might find the right thing, and that's fine, that's wonderful if you do. But if you don't, a therapist can help you to match that so that you're not dependent on the therapist for your whole life, but you can have them get you started.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I gotta
An
go.
amazing meeting. Thank you.
Have a
All
great weekend, y'all.
You too. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.